So, I think the point here is that on one end, you have a white man going into a black church, murdering 9 people, and then being apprehended and being taken to Burger King on his way to booking by the same police that black people fear and rightfully fear, who commit massive acts of violence on black people, regardless of the type of communities they're in. And then the other part of the narrative about Dylann Roof is that he had mental health problems. I haven't heard that about the Dallas or the Baton Rouge shooters, right? When black people traditionally do not commit acts of terror in this particular way. And so it's interesting how the narratives are framed for one group of people, or in the case of Dylann Roof because he's white, and another case for the Dallas and Baton Rouge shooters because they're black. So the point here is that our main narrative assumes that racism is a sickness and only rooted in people's minds. However, as Dr. Vargas and I know, racism is more than within individuals. Racism is institutional. Institutional racism operates whether racists exist or not, right? And this is because many of our policies today were originally created to preserve racial differences in our society. Institutions like the criminal justice system, education, housing, and the labor market are embedded with racist doctrines that we accept as equitable when they are inherently unequal. For example, despite increases in educational attainment for blacks and Latinos, the white, non-white wealth gap has not decreased. The wealth gap is rooted in acts of institutional racism that have evolved over time. Prior to the 1960s, whites benefited almost exclusively from wealth building opportunities like college education and home ownership opportunities offered by the GI Bill, Social Security, and the Homestead Act. Moreover, the middle class that we know to exist today was primarily created because 8 out of 10 men born during the 1920s were drafted to go to war, right? Regardless of race. But the reason why this becomes about race is because after these individuals came back, and they were then in their 30s and 40s in the 1950s and 60s. Think about this time point in American history now. Having children, that whites were afforded opportunities to go to college, to purchase homes, start up businesses, and through the Homestead Act, go out west and literally take land that was either possibly already given to Native Americans or was possibly even part of Mexico, right? And we can't necessarily misconstrue these things. Well, black veterans did the same thing white veterans did. They went to war, fought for our country, but when they returned, they weren't given these same benefits in the same way. This package of benefits, when we talk about GI Bill, Social Security, minimum wages, right, unions, set the standard for the middle class that we know to exist today. Blacks were not allocated those same opportunities in the same way. And that's extremely, extremely important for people to get. So institutional racism has continued in recent years as black and brown communities saw a disproportionate loss of wealth during the 2008 recession. Many of the faulty subprime mortgages targeted black and brown homeowners and were ruled discriminatory by the Department of Justice. Related to the criminal justice system, violent crime has actually decreased since the 1990s. Let me say that. Violent crime has actually decreased since 1990, despite public perception that suggests that it's actually on the rise. Yet, and this becomes important, the number of police killings has increased over this period, along with the number of mass shootings. Also, along with the number of black and brown people in prison who are in prison overwhelmingly for non-violent offenses. In fact, blacks and Latinos are more likely to be killed by the police than whites, even when they do not have a weapon, do not have a criminal record, and are not being physically aggressive. See, one thing people missed is that Philando Castile was pulled over 50 times in about the past 14 years. He did basically everything he could do to try to deal with this situation. He even took classes on how to interact with the police. But see, blackness trumps all of that. We can wear a nice suit. We can be respectful. We can be compliant. And compliance still does not mean that we won't be killed by the police, that we won't be roughed up by the police, right? That we won't be targeted by the police. And I know that experience personally, but it also bears out in the data. So the fear that police brutality instills in black and brown people mirrors the fear induced by lynchings of the past. Like tough on crime laws and police killings, lynching vilified and punished blacks without due process. That's similar to what police killings are doing today. And people really have to make that connection, right? That same type of fear and process that was being instilled. So this whole narrative about restoring law and order is all about that, right? Putting fear into a group of people that they actually are conditionally free, right? That we don't have as black people unconditional freedom. And so even though the Civil War ended more than 150 years ago, the killings of black and brown bodies plastered over social media, stand your ground laws and stop and frisk policies are the continuation of a historical pattern of institutional racist efforts to control black and brown bodies. We need legislation to reform institutions and reverse this pattern of governing our nation through historically biased policies that have contemporary ramifications. Derek Jones, who is a resident of St. Louis, grew up in and around Ferguson. He made a statement recently about how, we're so concerned about what's happening overseas, but there are terror zones and war zones right here in the United States where black people are being terrorized by police officers in ways that people don't even necessarily make sense of, right? And that becomes extremely important for us to get, that in the United States, there are literally people living in terror as if they are in a third world country. And we have to address this. So passing legislation to reform our institutions will require finding commonalities in the struggle for life, dignity, justice, and equity among both police officers and communities fed up with police brutality. We must work together to address the politics of fear and economic exploitation, creating the conditions where citizens can easily wage war on one another in our city streets. Part of this is dealing with gun control. I'm just saying. See, our current policies permit police officers and at times regular citizens to use excessive force by simply perceiving a threat or being fearful. Let me give you an example. The way that the law is actually set up, one of my boys is scared of dandelions. I don't really know why. I don't know what a dandelion did, but it's under his bed. It comes from the other room, and it does something. I don't really know what the dandelion is, who it is. All I know is that the dandelion hasn't really done anything to him. Does that give him the right, because he fears dandelions, to go out and literally stomp on all the dandelions he sees in the yard? Of course not. But you know what? That's what we're doing with policies. That's what happened with George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, is that we allow people to do this, right? This is what happened with Philando Castile. This is what is happening with all of these incidents, is that people aren't really doing anything to someone. They haven't technically committed a crime at that particular time, but because the law says that if you fear someone, then you have the right to take that fear into your own hands and do something about it, right? And that's highly problematic. So, working to prevent excessive violence, improving economic opportunity for the disadvantaged, and passing gun control laws will be beneficial to both minority communities and law enforcement. As we strive toward reform in the days and months to come, we must also shut down the fearmongers. Some will argue that police killings of black men justify the Dallas shooting and even what happened in Baton Rouge. Some will argue, on the other hand, that the Dallas shooting justifies stronger measures against black communities. However, this election season, some will also prey on the political fears for political power. For minorities, though, slogans like "Make America Great Again," and if you saw the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, "Make America Great Again." Who are they trying to make it great again for? Everyone who has a marginalized identity should wake up and realize what is happening in our country right now. So, some will work to protect the profit gain from every gun and bullet fired in this country, right? That's the NRA. Standing for truth and justice at this moment of crisis in our nation actually requires doing so in the face of those who aim to undermine it. We have some hard truths about our country to admit, reconcile, and rectify. We can stop these many civil wars before they collectively transform into something way more sinister than we can imagine. Like the aftermath of the Civil War in the late 1800s, America needs another era of reconstruction. We can stop gun violence. We can improve police-community relations in minority communities. We can progress toward ending racism. We can be better than this. We are better than this. We share this. We are Philando Castile. We are Alton Sterling. We are Orlando. We are Dallas. We are Baton Rouge. We are the United States of America. So on that note, if you're interested in more of what we're trying to do here, feel free to follow the YouTube channel. It's just YouTube /RRAY217. You can also go to my website, www.rayshonray.com, and check out the Daily Thought. because just remember, conversations matter like Black lives and books. And thank you for your time.